Okay, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining on to this week's webinar, or this month's webinar. Today, I'm Danielle Cahill, Head of Customer Experience with Peacock Interactive, and today I'm joined by Sean Peacock, Head of HR for Stride Treglown. And today we're really going to talk about the last couple of months, and really we're saying weathering the COVID storm. So kind of talking about just, before January, February, and how Stride as a practice was set up before the pandemic hit and, unsettled all of us unexpectedly. And then we're going to talk about some of the adaptations that Stride had to undertake, and Sean's going to talk us through those. And then we're going to talk about what lies ahead, talk a little bit about how Rapport assisted in this, and then we're going to talk about what lies ahead. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Sean, who's going to just give him a little bit of introduction to himself and to Stride Treglown as a practice as well.
Hi, so good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming along today on what is a lovely day outside. So just a quick overview of Stride Treglown and who we are. So we are an architectural practice, but we cover many different sectors and different services, including town planning and building surveying, interior design and landscape and project management. And we cover the whole of England and South Wales, really, and Wales. So we've got our biggest offices in Bristol, and we've got 330 members of staff, which for an architectural practice is relatively large. And because we've got that breadth around the country, COVID has interestingly affected us in different ways, and as it may have affected you and your offices. And as a practice, we put things into place initially to manage our continuity. And we've always planned that should something ever happen, across the country, it probably would affect one or two offices. So when COVID happened, obviously, that changed our plans quite dramatically because it affected all of us across the entire world right now, unfortunately. So it's put us in a different position. So I'm going to talk to you initially about what our systems were in place that helps us build a bit of resilience into our system. And then we're going to talk about a little bit about, how COVID hit. So if we can move on to this. Thank you. So prior to COVID, we had kind of built a bit of resilience into our system, really for business continuity, but it's also about our culture. And also when we do make changes, we make them as a whole business rather than just HR or IT or finance. We do it as a group. So one of the first things we've tried to instill into our culture is a culture of mutual trust and respect. And that's been ongoing for decades. That's not something you can just roll out overnight. And that's about instilling a sense of team leadership through our regional offices. So each of our offices feels different when you go to visit them, but we do have a corporate sense of who we are. And team leaders, providing good communication and feedback to their teams. My predecessor, Elizabeth Kavanagh, was head of HR, and Nicola Rich, who works on our team, has also fostered a culture of developing a coaching culture, which is about helping people develop themselves, along with things like well-being and financial transparency. So we share everything with our staff. In terms of our project finances, it can all be seen through Rapport. So when it comes to things like this, people have that information at their fingertips, including projects and where we are in our delivery. We also just embarked on a big piece of work last year in 2019 about agile and flexible working. So this wasn't in response to COVID, it was already in place when COVID hit, which was about agility is about being able to work anywhere, anytime within our offices, but also about, varying where you work, working from home, working out of shops and things like that. And then flexible working is more kind of a contractual thing, so part-time hours, 0 hours. And we have some guidance on our website if you're interested under our download section. And we had instilled that early on, and it was from our employee forum, and others really wanted guidance about what was on offer. And so we spent a long time as a business getting ready for not maybe COVID and not from this, but from the sense that people wanted to work from home, more flexibility for family arrangements, caring arrangements, or even just sometimes we've got people who are doing woodworking courses and want flexibility in their lives. So we have kind of core hours that people work towards, as well as what we call flexi days, which allow people to earn and accrue time. And that was, again, in place before COVID.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sean, that was just talking about flexible working. That's kind of something that you've built into Rapport, or you use Rapport for. So people are, able to have their working patterns within Rapport. And then also we kind of developed the flexi time system within Rapport, working with you guys as a practice many years ago. So, and that's, I was going to show people that later on towards the end of the session, just how that would work within Rapport 3, if anyone wanted to engage in it and bring it into their working practice.
Yeah, so the flexi days is, it's one of the benefits our staff love the most, and having that calculator in the system it helps a lot, because it means then staff know what they're working towards. It's been really useful. And then we've been working on a home working system, and it was actually, again, something that was on our books a while ago, and it's because our system's come under is coming under attack effectively. So we instigated a change project in 2018, 2019, and we've moved to what's called an Azure-based home working solution. So it's all our systems are through a system that's run out of the cloud. It's a Microsoft-based system, and all the graphics capability for Revit and such things is run out of those servers somewhere else. And when people dial in through their own home computer, they're basically looking for a kind of browser at that system. And it's very secure, and it came online around November, December 2019. So while COVID, we were very lucky. It came in at just the right time, but actually it was something that, again, was about business continuity. What happens if this was going to happen? We need something like this in place. And that's really allowed us to do it. And we've got a kind of standard software build within the system to make it easier to use. Originally, we thought 30 people might be using it on an evening after work or on a weekend or something. So it's been interesting to roll out to 330 in an emergency. But it's handled really, really well. And we'll talk a bit about that later. And then finally, a really important thing for us as a business is internal communication. We have a great marketing team who help with external and internal communication. The board are very good at providing updates. We have an employee forum that provides updates. We've got an intranet, and all this kind of two-way conversation really between employees and the board and their team leaders is quite central to how we operate as a business. And coming into the COVID crisis then, all of these things have come into play. So everything from communication to trust, a great home working system, to our ability to work flexibly and agilely wherever we are. So these things have really helped us prepare, but none of them were necessarily all created with this idea that there'll be a global pandemic and how it will affect us.
I don't think anyone was ready for that one. So, if I move on to the next slide, are you ready? I'm happy to talk us through kind of how you adapted and, in February, March, when we got this unexpected news that we were all going to be sent home and everything was going to be changed.
Yeah, so initially in January and February, when the news started coming out, something might be coming along. We used to refer to this as kind of more like we were thinking it might affect one office or two offices. Our continuity plan assumed that not all offices would all be hit at the same time. We were even using the analogy with some staff about snow days and adverse weather and get themselves on the home working system to get prepared, because we didn't want to overplay it. We didn't know it was coming, or we didn't know the effect it would have. We thought it might affect somewhere like London or one of our cities. And then as events started taking over more and more, we realized, and the board realized, that this was going to be a thing, and it's a thing that we had to prepare for. So we started having weekly sessions. The board met daily, and people called in who was needed to be called into. And we started identifying 5 key areas for us as a business that we had to maintain and that we had to ensure that we addressed each of these meetings. And as those meetings change from daily to weekly, that is still going on. We have it every Friday, and we have during the 17 weeks we've been in lockdown. So initially we concentrated on finances as well. So obviously finances are vital to us as a business, or any of your businesses, and understanding where we are in terms of risk. So one of the things we instigated was providing or asking our teams to give us a risk profile of their projects. What's the likelihood they might be stopped? Maybe potential work, is that going to happen? We also talked about cash flow and how that was going to affect us. And as a business, we were quite lucky that we had a good cash flow position. But also looking at our actual and potential incoming fees, what was going to happen, and seeing changes that happened. And we did see somewhat of a downturn. It's not been overly bad, but it has been a downturn, which I imagine all your businesses are experiencing as well. We also had the issue of expenses and employment costs to deal with. We still had outstanding expenses and people claiming for those. We have ongoing employment costs that we had to monitor, and we continue to monitor this day. And that was quite central to that financial discussion. And Penny Burgess, our finance director, along with Darren Wilkins, our managing director, are looking at all the time. And project risk sensitivity has been vital to that. And then tied into that project risk sensitivity is then the delivery of projects and making sure that we've been doing a lot for our clients during this time. So it's been thinking about how do we resource projects, learning to manage remotely. I imagine you've all been finding that an interesting change. How do you manage a team who might be spread out across the UK, or who you just can't see? So resourcing has been really vital to that, and understanding that. And our regional directors, so each representing one of our offices, has worked really hard to try and share resource. So if we see a downturn in one area, we're ensuring that we pick up staff from other places. But again, what's the potential financial risks there? And systems like Cubic and others have helped us with that. But another part of this is about key account information. So our marketing team early on tried to gather everyone to reach out to our key clients, our key subcontractors, and contact them and say, how are things going? How are we doing? We've been launching a system also of talking spaces, which is a kind of a marketing tool that enables conversation between us and the market right now. And that's been really helpful. And it all ties into that delivery, keeping those contacts going when you can't meet, you can't go for a coffee. So how are you going to keep that communication going? So tied to that communication is IT. So like I said before, we had a home working system built, it ready to go as we came into the new year. But increasing that scalability to 330 individuals has been a trial for our IT team. There have been hiccups along the way, of course there have. But again, a system designed for, it was always designed to be scalable. That was a part of the remit. But doing it in such short order was really important to us as a business, and our suppliers have done a really good job of getting that ready for us. But having that Azure network has also allowed a lot of our systems to talk to each other. So once people started working from home, logging into different systems has proved really easy, or relatively easy, and including things like rapport and accessing those things using this Azure-based system. IT have been working incredibly hard. It's effectively the glue that's held our system together. Without it, I don't think we would be where we are now. And we'll talk about the future later, but it will enable us to continue working into the future from home. From my perspective, and maybe some of you on this call today and this webinar today, is HR. So HR, we've been thinking about people during this time. We've been thinking about how we can help them. And one of the big things that we saw initially, particularly those people who had to be who had to work from home early, were those who were self-shielding. So people who may have underlying medical conditions, people who might have caring responsibilities or had to shield members of their family. And that's brought added stresses and problems to people's lives. Being a professional at home while you might have a family member in the house or others making noise is quite difficult, along with the stress of wanting to do really well by their clients, and at the same time not being able to see their team and having that daily interaction. So we've done a lot towards mental health support, and you may see in your own teams that's a big demand right now. One of my colleagues, Nicola, has been working with REBA and the Architectural Benevolent Fund, or Society, on managing apart. And how do we manage apart? How do we deal with each other? And how do we manage each other while we're so distant from each other? And it's weighed heavily on a lot of team leaders' shoulders about how do I communicate with people? How do I keep that contact? And others who are kind of feeling that pressure. So we've been doing a lot around that. Of course, furloughing has been massive for everyone involved. We've had up to about 20% of our staff at some points furloughed. That number has come down in the last few months as projects have come live again, building sites have become active. But tracking that and making sure the paperwork and things have been in place is quite difficult. We'll talk about that in another slide, but that's been a big thing for HR, and it's a big thing for me and my team. And again, that ongoing reviewing employment costs and making sure that we have enough fee to cover those employment costs. And we've been quite lucky so far. We've not made any contractual changes in terms of salary cuts or hours or redundancies. Of course, that's always something that I imagine all your businesses are still considering, and it's still on the agenda. But luckily so far, we've not had to do that. And then relaying all these things back to our employees as well as our clients is communication. So again, like I said before, we've had regular updates from our chairman or MD, each covering these 5 areas, external communication with others. And so as an ongoing kind of solution to this problem of COVID and how we respond to it, these are our kind of core areas as a business that we've been using and discussing weekly. And it's proven really helpful, and it's proven actually, sometimes it was really hard to get that many different directors and others together across the UK. And now through technology, we can meet every Friday without a problem. It's been a change.
Yeah, again, it certainly makes it easier having kind of meetings with people in different geographical locations, everybody just being able to dial in and keep that communication going.
So, yeah, so we were going to talk about next, is about the idea then of how that's worked for us as a business. So those 5 key areas have been underlined by lots of our systems, and one of those vital systems for us has been Rapport 3, and having access to that information anywhere through a web browser has been vital for us.
How many years have you been live with Rapport? And do you know now? Is it about 4 or 5? Probably 5, actually.
Yeah, it was. I think it was March 2016 we went live, but we were obviously in conversations way before then with Rapport, because we had to bring in all our payroll information, all our project information. It was that was a lot of help, and coming on board with that. Yes, so it probably is 5 years now.
Yeah. So Rapport 3 was certainly well embedded in kind of as part of your day-to-day life once the change hit.
Yeah, and our staff are used to it, actually. It's the go-to kind of resource we have to understand where we are with our projects, understand what, in my particular case, with HR information. So it's, again, in this time, it's been really useful, and it's been because we can access it from any web browser. It's been incredibly useful. So again, some of the areas that we've been covering, I've talked about already, but it's the financial information. So things that we already had in place were timesheets and project financial information. That's ongoing. That's always been entered. Potential and actual fees, that's something we track, and the board track all the time. But some of the newer fields that it's been really useful to have is being able to customize it. So again, we talked about those risk profiles and asking, so the guidance came from the board, this is how you should be measuring it. And then staff entered it into Rapport 3, and that allowed us to run reports against it, track it. Rebecca Draper, our knowledge manager, and others have been helping us create reports for that. And then a new thing that's been really useful for us, and it was always planned to come online, but it's been useful while we've been in lockdown, is expenses. So we've got the new expenses system, the electronic version. It's been really useful.
Okay, so you're taking the photos of your receipts and everything and entering them in. Okay, great.
Yeah, and actually, while expenses are down, obviously people aren't traveling as much. It's been really useful because there's still some expenses about people buying computer equipment or paying for professional memberships and things. They still on go, and being able to do it remotely by taking a photo of it rather than before we had tons of paper and staples coming out of our ears. It's been useful to electronically. We talked about delivery as well. Those ongoing things and resourcing. It's been quite useful, and tracking that for projects is been vital.
I suppose with resourcing, one big thing is obviously if you're furloughing some staff, and obviously you've those gaps to fill, but then equally, I know you mentioned that some of your projects that would be on site, that they might have furloughed staff or they might have stopped. So it's kind of managing and tweaking those resources as they go along. So you find it useful as well to help with the kind of the delivery and making sure that you were doing enough work to keep the project going to at the right speed.
Yeah, and as building sites and other things came back online, getting those people back again and getting that resource back in position again. So understanding when that might happen has been really useful. One thing that's been quite useful in the IT, we talked about the system and being anywhere, is data cubes as well. So Penny, our finance director, has been using data cubes for a while and importing them into Excel. Our marketing team have been using it using Power BI. And again, that's been really useful to be able to draw information out of the system and be able to report on it and be able to measure it again anywhere at any time has been incredibly important. HR for me, career history, we had an old system where we couldn't track career changes. Considering we've had a lot of different people on furlough at different times, be it fully, flexibly, or returned, and all the paperwork involved, tracking those changes has been incredibly important to me, mainly because we need to get the money right that was requesting from HMRC. Making sure we pay those employees correctly has been incredibly, I keep using the word incredible, it's all important. Overselling incredibly important all the time, but it's HMRC and making sure that's right. And tied to that is our full-time equivalent headcount. So the way we're tracking also, it's fee per fee earner. So we need to understand our FTE to make sure that we have enough fee coming in to support those members of staff. If it isn't through resourcing, and I mentioned earlier, we've not made any redundancies or reductions at this time, and that's because we've been able to track and use the furloughing system to help us manage our way through this process.
Okay, super.
Another one sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say, after the slide, I was going to just dip in and show again how we could manage the furloughing and how you can create new career records for that. And then and we've on the back of that done a nice little Power BI chart that will display it and quite graphically and visibly, and you can tweak it with filters. So I was going to jump into that after that.
Yeah. And then we've, again, from the HR perspective, and maybe for some others on this course, not always that important, but for us, having personal contact information in this time when we are all so separated from each other has also been really important. So they might have a computer problem. How are we going to contact them? Well, we can look at their private information. As a HR team, we don't share that for GDPR reasons, but having that information there at our fingertips through a secure web browser has been really useful. It means then if people are having difficulties, and also early on, we didn't know what impact this would have had on people's health. So if people are going sick, why are they going sick? Is it because of COVID? How are you? Can we help you in any way? So being able to reach out to people using that information for me has really helped as a head of HR. And then tracking holiday leave for the future, again, a big dilemma for a lot of businesses, and I'm part of a HR network, and it's a conversation that comes up often, is how do we we've got people on furlough accruing a lot of holiday, we've got people accruing lots of holiday, how do we track all that? Because just as projects might be taking off in quarters 3 and 4, people might go, I'm going to go on holiday. So how do we know what people are doing? How do we track that? Has been, we've been scratching our heads over that one, because how do you get people on furlough to take holiday? How do you get people to take holiday now? But one of the things, going back to what we talked about mental health supports, is making sure that people do take holiday. Otherwise it does impact their mental health. So it's something we've been not pushing in terms of forcing people, but suggesting to people that they take some holiday to have a nice break. And then finally, communication. We talked about visibility of projects and finances. In this time, one of the stressors on people is the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen, and therefore being clear with people through finances and through information like that is incredible. Well, I keep saying incredibly important, but it is important. It helps with them understanding where we are as a business. It helps them understand where they are as a project, and put measures in place to support them.
Okay, great. So just to kind of conclude with this slide, I was just going to show one or two small things within report 3 so that you can see how this relates. So hopefully you can still see my screen. I've just brought up a report 3 site, and one area that I've just brought in here is this flexi hours panel. So this is one that we just discussed earlier. It was one that we developed several years ago in conjunction with Stride, actually. So this is the ability for staff members to accrue hours as the weeks go on. So it's a configurable setting, so we can work with you, our support team, to set it up for you in the background. And there's lots of different settings for it, so you can decide your parameters on how it's going to work for you. But for the example in this one here, it's showing it's a monthly accrual, so you accrue your hours monthly, and then they expire the following month. So the idea is that any hours that you accrue in the previous month, you have the ability to take them back in the next month. Now we can have a minimum and a maximum that you can start accruing them only after a particular time, and then once they can expire the following month if you don't take them. So you can see in this example here, so that last month I accrued up to 7.5 hours, and it's showing that these are available to me to book as time off. And I can see in this current month I've accrued 6 hours, and I need 1.5 hours, and I think there's a daily cap on this that you need to work in excess of a day to start taking the hours back, essentially. So this is really visible. Each individual has their own flexi hours, and they'll be able to see quite quickly and clearly what they have available to them. Also, in terms of kind of flexible working patterns, I know that most of our clients actually use auto approval of timesheets, which means that they just submit their timesheets and those costs get immediately reflected against the project. But what we've also got to assist with that is we've got validation rules around timesheets. So you can say that staff must work 7.5 hours per day, and they must work 37.5 hours per week. But we can tweak and change these. So if somebody wants to have a flexible working week where it's 37.5 hours, and it's up to them how they work their hours. I know, Sean, before you've mentioned in the past that you have, people must work between 10 o'clock and 4 p.m. And you can flex your hours slightly. So we can have validation rules that it doesn't have to be daily down to the minute when they do those hours, just as long as they do them over the weekly period. Okay, so the other item that I was just going to mention is one that Sean mentioned, is about the ability to manage records of people moving from furlough and different kind of employment types throughout this period. So doing this, you can utilize our career history area. So you can see here, I've just got a record set up, and I've set myself up working from the 1st of November as, if I just click down here, you'll be able to see my employment type is a full-time employee. But as the time has changed from the 23rd of March, I've moved on, and you can see that I've gone to furlough 100%. And then again, I can see at the beginning of June, I've once changed it again, and now I'm here at furlough. Oh, sorry, didn't mean to click on it. Furlough 50%. So you'll be able to see for each individual their career history record and how they've moved to this stage, and you've got a very accurate record of the changes that have been made. So from this, we've created a new addition to our Power BI, our HR Power BI pack. So if you see here, I've got a number of charts showing the type of employment type across the practice. So the first little pie chart up here is showing us at this moment, at this point in time, are the stretch across all the different employment types we have in the history, in the career history for each individual. So we can see we've got 85 people on full-time employment, we've got 11 people on 100% furlough, and then we've got 10 people on 50% furlough. And it's also got a list here of those individuals who are on that 100% or on that 50%. So using these filters on the left-hand side, I can actually get into that quite quickly, into the granular information of it. So I can look at it across division, discipline, branch, grade, or line manager. So for example, if I just jump in here and select James Adams, you'll see that the charts update. So for his team that he's responsible for, he'll be able to see that he's got 9 people on full-time employment, 3 on 50% furlough, and 2 on 100% furlough. And it will actually quickly list out those names, so it's very visible to kind of jump between them all. You'll also see the employment type chart at the bottom here as well. So this is showing us the change across those months. So there is a date range picker here, so we've got just from February to August here to show us. And you can see here that, you know, in February, we just had 1 consultant and 12, let me just unclick James here so we can just see the practice as a whole. So we're back here to having 99 full-time employees. And then we can see now how that has changed as the time has progressed and people have gone on furlough and coming back and coming back from furlough, and how it tweaks and changed. So it's very visible and easy to share. And again, as I mentioned, you've got all these options here of the filters, so you can look at it from different viewpoints, you know, and grades and things like that as well. Okay, so that's just a kind of a little insight relating some of those items that Sean's talked about, relating directly into rapport. I'm just going to jump back to our final slide, and it's just kind of talking about what lays ahead and what Sean and everyone at Stride had kind of planned for the next couple of months, and how they're going to see the rest of this through, however long it goes on for.
How long does it go for? Yeah. So what we did early on was when we started realizing that obviously working from home has changed things. It may have changed how your practices and businesses are working. And so the board and others brought together a future working group, which consists of different directors in the business, HR, and our business change manager, head of business change, Steve Dolphin. And this future working group's been thinking for a while about, first of all, it was initially, how do we get back into our offices? So how do we deal with the COVID crisis in general? And it's something that we're only beginning to do now. And we did an employee survey. So we asked our employees, you know, what do you want from a future workplace? How would it look? Now you've experienced home working, how often do you want to be in the office beyond the COVID crisis? What would that look like to you? Where would you need support? Is it about computer equipment? Is it about infrastructure in your home in terms of broadband? Is it about your desks, your chairs? And just getting a feel for what people wanted, as well as doing different workshops with leaders within our business. So we use online tools like Zoom and things like that. And we've now formed 3 working groups. So one is going to be thinking about, how do we travel as a business across the UK? And we do international work as well. Do we want that kind of working travel to continue? We've reduced our travel expenses massively during this time. Yeah. So how do we maintain that to the future? Mm-hmm. You know, how do you maintain contact with colleagues and work sites? And if we do have to visit them right now, how do you do it securely? So we've been thinking about that, and travel, and how do, and as a business, we're also signed up to Architects Declare and the sustainability and trying to aim for a carbon neutral business as best we can as we go into the future and planning that out. And today, for example, this week's our Green Week, and we've been talking about these issues. And then we've got a working practices, which is about how do we work as individuals within a business? How do we spend our time? Is it 2, 3, 4, 5 days a week in the office? We talked about core hours. So we currently work from 10 till 4 as our core hours, with a 7.5-hour day for most full-time members of staff. What would that look like in the future? Can we be more adaptable to that? And can we spread that out in different ways? We were already quite flexible as a business, but could we be more flexible? But the reverse is true of that, though. How do we make sure that we respond to our clients' needs? How do we make sure we're there on the end of the call when they call us? So we've also have someone who's just joined us, who's worked from the contractor side as a director in a large contractor. They've come aboard, and they're going to also help us talk about our business and our delivery, but they're also going to help us think about how do we support our contractor clients and others, and how do we make sure we're ready and we're in kind of footstep with them, really. And then again, when it comes to working practices, where our offices aren't being used so much because people are working from home, what are our offices going to look like in the future? Yeah. And that's quite exciting for architects. They love that bit. They love the bit talking about spaces. As someone in HR, I love talking about practices. They love talking about spaces. But what are we going to do with our space? Are we going to use it for project teams? So sub-consultants and others come in and use that space for those purposes. Do we use it as a learning space? Do we use it for meetings and get-togethers? That's the exciting bit as well for us. It's about thinking, how do we use that space? We don't necessarily want to lose our spaces. We've got some really lovely offices across the UK that we're quite proud of. But I think the nature of work and what the survey taught us was we don't think it's going to go back to normal. And I think maybe many of you on this call today will realise that actually, I think across the UK and across the world, professionals are beginning to go, do I need to do that hour-and-a-half commute into central London? Do I need to do that few-hour drive into Bristol or other cities when I could actually work from home? And maybe our offices will become places where we go as hubs for certain activity. So I work from home, but I go into the hub to do something special. I go in there to have a client meeting or to do a webinar or whatever it might be, but it has a purpose beyond just that's the place I work at. And that's the thing we're beginning to address now as a business, and as I imagine many of you as architectural practices and engineering firms beginning to question, how do we adapt to this? And COVID and people being shielding and the issues with schools and things, if that didn't exist, what would the working world look like right now? How do we adapt to that? And that's quite interesting. We're referring to it as our reinvention phase. We're reinventing ourselves as a business to respond to clients, respond to our customers and others and our employees. But that takes a bit of time and thought. And so we've started that journey now.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think a lot of practices would relate to the exact, what you've just been talking through there now. I think it is going to change for everybody and going forward, not just for the, not just for the next year. I think everybody has, as you say, got a taste for working from home and how they can, change their work-life balance to be more flexible and, and to for the better of everyone, really. Yeah.
I think it's shown because everyone's experienced it now. Yeah. It's shown what it could be like but of course this isn't normal either. I think anyone on this call would say this isn't normal. So what would the new normal look like? How do we want it to be? Because there's the chance that we can make it happen. And then that's, for someone in HR, that's quite exciting. How can we change and organize the way that we work to be more adapted is good.
Yeah, I mean, this certainly has given everyone kind of the shake and the ability to actually make these kind of more drastic changes where they would have been quite, a huge change or a big concept change. I know, people would have not really questioned could they work from home. It was never even thought about for some people, whereas now it's definitely out in the open for everyone kind of to discuss and, as you say, look to the new norm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so that was just our final slide. I've just got one more that's not jumping up. There we go. So I suppose on behalf of Cubic, I'd like to say a big thank you to Sean for joining us today and giving us a really good insight onto how he, and as part of the HR team, and then also how Stride have kind of reacted to this situation. And we're really grateful for that. I hope everybody else has found this quite interesting. If there's any questions, please pop them up. I think we have some.
We've got one from Charles, which is about our thoughts and staff starting on site meetings. So our staff have during this crisis been going to site meetings when needed. So the big bit of advice is obviously follow HSE and Public Health England's advice about meetings and things. It's about risk assessment. So one of the things we've been asking staff and our clients and others to provide is, risk assessments to consider what's happening on site. We've been involved in, we're quite large in healthcare, so a lot of our staff have been having to go to healthcare sites during a crisis, and that brought up a lot of questions. And it would be fair to say some of our staff were like, "Oh, should I go? Shouldn't I go?" But when you listen to the kind of support and the advice and guidance that are coming from NHS estates and others, has put those people's minds at ease. So I think returning to sites, if it can be done in social distancing as best as we can at 2 meters, outside spaces, has been quite useful. But yeah, it really is down to risk assessments, really, and that's one of the messages that our managing director has been pushing with employees, is to say, look, this is what make sure you've got the risk assessments. If you're unsure, if you're unhappy, let people know. Don't just go along with it because you think that's okay. We want people to feel safe during this time, so it's something we've been working towards.
Okay, we have another question that's come in, just asking about how you can properly collaborate with design. So I suppose that's your project teams working together, and particularly talking about kind of the more junior level who really do need that training and support as to learn from their jobs as they progress through their career. How have you been managing with that, or how's that been working, or plans for the future? That's a good
question.
As well?
I think that's a good question. I think collaboration in all its different forms, particularly around designing and sharing ideas, is something that I think it'd be fair to say not many people have managed to fully figure out. There's different tools out there and different teams have been trialing them. I'm going to be honest, I'm not completely au fait with them, so I won't name them today, but they have been trying different tools and things. We have a system that allows us to do markups and things, but when it comes to actual design and collaboration, there are other tools out there, online tools that people have been using. When it comes to culture and how do you support those junior members of staff, again, that's one we've been definitely struggling with, struggling to come to terms and thinking about how we can help them, should I say. It's about regular contact, regular phone-ins, using tools like Zoom to have regular conversations and chats, and that's what our teams do anyway. That check-in time does take, it's more time consuming. Working from home, while it has its advantages, for many people also has major disadvantages, and it can be time consuming and cost more in terms of time. We've just put an advert up recently to recruit some part ones. We've had a lot of applications, and one of the questions we've been asking ourselves is, how do you embed junior members and staff? How do you show them collaboration? Because for our directors, there's always that thing of, you learn a lot by being in the room, metaphorically as well as, actually in the room, and listening to phone calls, listening to how people respond to requests, people leaning over and going, oh, have you done that bit? That's harder to do. I don't think we're going to be the first industry that's ever had to experience it. The software industry, for example, I imagine Cubic has probably had this before, where working remotely on something like a design feature and things, software industry has done it in the past. How we do that in the future, I think, is about adapting. And again, is that what our offices are for then? Our offices are come together, share an idea, share the design principle, and then move away and do the actual work. So you do the actual work from home. And then, there's that. That's kind of where I think we are collaboration. We've definitely not got it now, but I think there's lots of conversations going on around it in terms of software and things. There's a question there I can answer pretty quickly. Have we published our risk assessments? I don't know. We've published them internally, so all staff can see them for their offices. We're not having clients on site yet, but if a client was to come on site or something, we would obviously share that with them. But yeah, we have got risk assessments. We have people who are in-house much more, clued up on risk assessments than myself. But yeah, I've seen them myself, and they have been shared with every single member of staff. If they were to turn up in the buildings, they know what to do. In relative terms, how expensive was the virtual desktop interface you mentioned? I don't know the answer to that, Rob, but feel free to pop me an email and I will try and find out. I don't actually know off the top of my head. It was, at the time, just so to put into context, we were one of the first companies to use such a system, and it's proven really useful. And we had a group that helped us set it up. and put it in place. And for us, what it was really important is about file sizes and sharing graphics and things like that. And trying to find a system like that's really difficult, as well as having good cybersecurity, scalability, it tied in with things like Cubic and Office 365 and things like that. And it's all a long chain of planning. So there's a lot of effort going into it. I don't know the costs. Sorry.
Okay, super. So that's a great bunch of questions. Okay, well, I think that's it then for today. Sean, thank you again for joining us and sharing your experience. And if anybody on this webinar would like to contact either myself or Sean or our sales team for any prospective clients who would like to hear more about Report 3, please do so by emailing us directly. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you.